My name's Aaron, welcome back to my channel. How are you? I'm fantastic and I'm doing really well. Today I'm reviewing Gucci Guilty Absolute. £55 for 50ml, £81.50 for 90ml. The notes are leather, cypress, patchouli and woody notes. This is the second time I have reviewed this, and I'll explain why as we go through the review. And one thing I want to say right at the beginning of this is these reviews are made up from my thoughts and feelings based on about 20 years experience within the cosmetics and perfume industry, and whether I like it. So all that sort of thing is built into it. I also want you to know that none of my reviews will ever be sponsored. None of my reviews will ever be influenced by anything. I don't watch any other fragrance review channel, and I don't go onto any frag sites at all. So really I'm quite isolated to what goes on out there. So you are getting, generally speaking, the first hand experience apart from this one, NSSA. I always want to keep this channel my thoughts and feelings, and I never really want to be influenced. I do get asked quite a lot actually, which we've noticed this year, but I'm not really into that at all. It takes the fun and pleasure out of it if I'm influenced. That may be good for some other people, but it's not good for me, and I don't think it's good to give you a biased opinion. So you'll never hear, put this code in to buy this, ever. Anyway, enough babbling and on to the review. Do we have our full-size bottles? Are we engaged with our higher self? Let's get testing. So, the reason I'm recording this again is this is a really heavy, dense, intense formulation, and I felt it was a little bit too aggressive for my liking, but the dry down is really nice. So I'm going to talk about this in two aspects. This absolutely smells of what I thought men would want to smell of when I started developing my own fragrance. And so to me this smells of somebody who's like hunter-gathering, killing animals, all that sort of stuff. This is what it smells of. It's an incredibly dominant and bitter, and the bitterness is a mixture of the oak moss raw materials combined with cypress, and cypress I don't really like, to be honest. It is incredibly bitter and intense. There's also some wood notes in this which I'll get to, which are incredibly intense. So this is incredibly dense, and as you heat up it comes off the skin. There absolutely is patchouli mixed with some wood compounds, and the wood compounds I am detecting is one called norlimbinol, and norlimbinol is incredibly potent, quite dominating, and I see a lot of these compounds as going from sort of amber molecules, which can be very excitatory, through to wood compounds, and too much of norlimbinol can smell of petrol. So for my liking, this smells solventy, petrol, combined with the patchouli and cypress and oak moss just makes this incredibly dense petrol, and it has a sort of almost like a wet concrete sort of smell to it. So this smells incredibly industrial. But the dry down, if you can get beyond the initial smash in the face, which is incredibly unpalatable, I really have to say, the patchouli helps to come through, and it helps to, you sort of get something evolving onto the skin. This has ambroxylin, so this is a lot of animal notes. This is absolutely built upon Isu Super, which is also called ambergris ketones. So this has a lot of animal notes to it, which is what I'm detecting at the background of this, which is why I'm feeling that this is for hunter gathering, all that sort of stuff, quite primordial. But the dry down softens and becomes more palatable. Personally, I find oak moss at quite high concentrations a little bit too jarring, especially with cypress. For me personally, it's very intense, oaky, woody, petrol-y. On to my final thoughts. When you try this, you need to give it a good hour to settle, and 1 or 2 sprays is absolutely enough. But I absolutely think there is a place for this sort of fragrance. Not everybody wants to smell of vanilla and wood and sort of sweetness. Some people really want something quite aggressive, and this is an aggressive fragrance. This grabs you by your throat and makes you submit to it. After an hour, it becomes slightly sweeter. So I'm going to go through my marks with you. So first off, this is absolutely worth the cost, because Noliminol is incredibly expensive, and Broxin is sort of, that's an expensive raw material, but when you're buying 200 litres, it's not really expensive. So this is dense, ambery, animalistic, absolutely worth the money. When I think of the technical marks, I think of whether it complies with the paperwork, whether it's legal, whether it's safe, all of that sort of stuff. And then on the other bit where I think it's technically really good. And in this instance, I don't think it fits with the name. For Absolute, I sort of think of vanilla Absolutes. I sort of think of Absolutes that are sort of a lot softer. And this is so hard and aggressive that I don't really understand the name. This would have been better with a different name. And for me personally, it's a little bit too dense and heavy, and it has no softness, has no extension, it's just sort of, it's a small round ball of fragrance that sort of expands out and commands your attention. It is undoubtedly masculine, and for me slightly unpalatable. So in this instance, I'm sort of going to split the technical things into two ways. Technically, paperwork, all that sort of, it's going to be a 2 out of 2. Technically, the way it's been built, I think it's far too dense and far too heavy, and I'd love to see it of extended. Actually, these sort of fragrances do not need to be so dense and heavy. It could have been extended, and I think it would have been much more enjoyable. So in this instance, I'm going to give it a 1 out of 2. So that's 3 out of 4 for the technical, plus 2. Do I like it? I don't like it. And as I said, I think it's so dense, so heavy, it's incredibly long lasting and doesn't come off your skin at all. And it took quite a lot of washing to get it off, actually. And you might be interested to know, in between each review, I go and have a shower just to make sure my skin is fresh so I can get a really good opinion of it. This did not come off my skin, and actually it didn't come out the room. It felt for a couple of days like it was in here, and it felt a bit stale. And this, because of the cypral and oak moss and sort of animalistic notes, went off on my skin. It started to smell so bitter. It had a bitterness to it, and the bitterness just never really ever left my skin. I'm gonna mark this a 7 out of 10, but this is the caveat to this. If you love this sort of heavy, dense, petrol-y, incredibly animalistic and woody fragrance, I think that you would love this, and I think this really has a place. But for me personally, I find it a little bit too palatable. What's quite interesting is I took this to work and I sprayed it on all the lads, and none of them liked it either, actually, which is sort of interesting. Normally you have a I could like something and then somebody really likes it, or we've got 3 boys in the factory, and normally there's sort of like an opinion, but this was categorically across the board not liked at all, and they all picked up on the petrol wet concrete smell, which I found really interesting, actually. But as I said, there is absolutely a place for this, and I think if you really want this sort of dense, heavy, dark fragrance, then I think you'll love it. This reminds me massively of that black ink, and this also reminds me a little bit of that oud for greatness, but it's made so much more bitter. This sort of feels like oud for greatness without the fabulous sort of oud core and just masses of sort of leathery notes in it. So for me, it feels a little bit like an inspiration from oud for greatness, and that's in my opinion, of course. So I hope you love that review. Thumbs up and subscribe for more fascinating, interesting content. Lots of moving hands and lots of reviews. I'm going to go and have lots of showers to get this off my skin. Hope you're staying safe and well, and I'll see you soon.